longing for? Love. In darkness, due to the cloud of ignorance, we're trying to find that experience through so many alternatives that just don't work. Because we're looking for something that's real. We want the pleasure of love. But when we forget it from within, then we seek it through all sorts of material arrangements which are temporary. You become attached to something, but inevitably it either fades in its experience of pleasure or it's lost. The love of romance. Man and woman are looking in each other's eyes and seeing the moon and the stars. But we've seen many instances where a few years later, they're in a divorce court looking at each other's eyes. And they're seeing blazing forest fires of each other's anger and hatred for each other. Yes. There's no permanence. We're looking in the wrong direction. Yoga is the art of finding the treasure of love from within ourselves and being instruments of that love by being compassionate beings to share that love with everyone and everything in this world. It may seem that that's something very far away, but actually, it's the very closest thing. We'll go back to the analogy of the cataract in the eye. To see is not some distant thing. Your eye can see. It's just covered. Just take away the impediment and you can see. Take away the darkness of our various egos and attachments in this world, and the soul can see everything clearly as it is. And in that situation, we can see a precious, beautiful opportunity everywhere. A wise person, even in what appears to be the greatest reversals of life, sees it with a grateful heart. How could I grow? What can I learn? How can I improve myself? How can I increase that connection of taking shelter of the Lord in that situation? And then what is apparently negative becomes something very, very positive. Seeing light where other people see darkness. That is what this particular verse of Bhagavad Gita is teaching us. And this is not something very foreign. It's the closest thing because it's who we are. To be yourself means to be without fear, without anxiety, to feel the happiness of love in every situation. In our own tradition, this chanting of God's names, Cheto Darapana Marajanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. It's simply to clean away the debris of ignorance, to clear away the darkness so that we could simply see things as they are, according to who we are. This chanting of mantra. Mantra means, man is mind and tra means to free. Mantra means that sound vibration that frees the mind from darkness. And when the darkness is gone, what's left? Light. You can't turn off darkness. That's the problem. We're trying to deal with darkness by turning off darkness. And we can spend trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars and trillions of hours of intelligent, materially intelligent women and men to somehow or other turn off the darkness of anxiety and fear. But it doesn't work that way. All you have to do is turn on the light. That's what spirituality is. Yani sa sarvabhutanam, the Bhagavad Gita says, for an enlightened person, what is night is day for a person in darkness, and vice versa. People are very, very much struggling to turn off the darkness, to stop the suffering, to stop the pain, to stop the anxieties. Yes, we have to deal with the world on this level, but that's not enough. If one has boils all over her or his body, it's very painful. So it's natural that we put some compress and some medicine on the boil itself to relieve the suffering. But unless we cure the cause of the problem, the disease in the blood, no matter how many times we treat a boil, there's going to be another one and another one and another one. So we have to deal with the problems in this world in a practical way. But the Bhagavad Gita and other great spiritual literatures and teachers, they are directing us in such a way, although we have to deal with the problems in this world on a practical level, we should do it coming from an enlightened state. Rather than trying to turn off the darkness, we just turn on the light. The light of knowledge, the light of truth, the light that is within all of us. The greatest treasure and the only true happiness. So mantra simply awakens the divinity within us. And the essence of spirituality is to enlighten us from within so that we can be dynamic and practical in whatever career, in whatever social position we may be in this world, from that platform, as instruments of light rather than instruments of darkness. Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Yes. In whatever particular avenue we are pursuing in our lives, I often use this example. I've given it here a few times. I was at a college in Bombay some years ago. It was an entire college of accountant students. It was in an auditorium. There was about 300 or 400 accounting students working on their BAs, their MAs, or PhDs, whatever. And they were all in an auditorium. And I gave a lecture. And afterwards, I asked for questions. And one person, very, very charismatic, popular, rowdy young man. He stood up like an evangelist. And he said, everything you're saying is useless. And he said, what is the use of your being a Swami? If everyone was a Swami like you, who would grow the food? Who would protect the nation? Who would do the banking? So therefore, everything you say I have to consider is useless. I said, what you're saying is true. I said, but let me ask you a question. What if everyone in the world was an accountant like you? Who would grow the food? Who would protect the nation? Who would do the banking? In fact, if everyone was an accountant, there would be 100% unemployment in the world because no one would need an accountant. So everyone cheered when he said about me, but then when I said that, they also cheered. I said, the fact is, there's a need for accountants, and there's a need for farmers, and there's a need for bankers, and there's a need for people who are politicians who are protecting the nations. There's a need for swamis too. To tell people about how they can best be instruments for change in this world in a positive way. So whatever our field may be, we may be husbands or wives or fathers or mothers. We may be sons or daughters. We may be bankers or software engineers or farmers. We may be whatever our particular line of duty for practically living within this world. What is important is our motivation. Are we motivated by the darkness in the form of greed and arrogance and envy and endless passions for my own personal benefits? Then we're instruments of just perpetuating the problems of this world. Or while performing our own career, or as students, whatever we're studying, if we're motivated to learn these subjects, to perform our duties with a pure heart. I believe it was Karl Marx, he said, religion is the opiate of the masses. That when people see, according to the principle of destiny, that things are destined, and when people feel that I'm an eternal soul, so really what happens in this world doesn't all matter that much, then they become unproductive. But it's just the opposite. Which is a more powerful and dynamic motivation? Greed or love? If a mother loves her child, is she passive? In the middle of the night when the baby's crying, does the mother just, it's all illusion. Besides that, I'm tired and my husband gave me a hard time today. Let him cry. Even if the mother herself is sick and tired and everything else, if she loves her child, she'll be up there all night to help her. That's love. Greed is a motivation. Selfishness is a motivation that impels so many people to work so hard to get ahead. But love is a much more powerful force. It's a more dynamic force. The Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was a warrior. And his opponent, Duryodhana, was a warrior. Duryodhana was exploiting people. He was cheating. He was selfish. He was an egomaniac. He was violent. He was exploiting the world. And Arjuna, he didn't even care about being a king. He didn't care about being a ruler. He just wanted to serve. He had a fully compassionate, pure, loving heart. So there was a war between good and evil. and who was motivated more. Arjuna didn't say, well, let it be. He understood people were being exploited. He stood up. Back in the 60s, sometimes I would march with the followers of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, he wasn't violent, but he was really an activist. Mahatma Gandhi may not have been violent, but he was an activist. They worked really hard. They were dynamic. But it was based on their religious or spiritual principles to try to help people, risking their lives for the benefit of others. And see what they did. One little skinny old man, Mahatma Gandhi, overthrew the whole British Empire. And Martin Luther King, by his fearless, dynamic endeavors, paved the road for an African-American president of the United States. So no, religion is not the opiate for the masses. Ignorance is the opiate for the masses. They may be working and struggling so hard, but for what? What's happening to the world? We're coming so far with technology, we're coming so far with science, we're coming so far in so many ways of educations and universities. But look in the environment, the ecology. Look at all the nuclear weapons stocked up all over the world. Look at how many wars and how much strife. And look at the economic collapses and the uncertainties and all these very, very unnatural diseases caused by pollutions and everything else. It's great what the pharmaceutical companies are doing as far as treating diseases, but if there's not light, you can cure polio, which is wonderful. But if the society is living according to such unnatural, exploitative, and greedy methods, it's increasing cancer. How many of you know someone who has either contracted or died of cancer? A couple generations ago, it wasn't hardly there. Not like it is. And heart disease due to stress. And the World Health Organization explains the third largest killer in the 21st century is depression. So we're working so hard and we're curing certain things, but overall, are we really making life qualitatively better in the world? So it is the greatest need. We need enlightened politicians, enlightened businessmen and women, enlightened students, enlightened software engineers, enlightened farmers, enlightened architects, enlightened accountants, enlightened mothers, enlightened fathers, enlightened sons and daughters, enlightened teachers and professors who are motivated by love, by kindness, by compassion, rather than just motivated by their own selfish desires. And oftentimes hatred. Does that answer your question? So spiritual life is not about changing your occupation or changing your setting in society. Let those things be. It's about changing our heart, changing our purpose in life, changing darkness to light through whatever we do. Is there any other questions? Yes. The first step is the desire to do so. The conviction that this is what I should be doing in my life. Adoshuddhatata sadhu sangota bhajanakriya. When we have faith, even a little bit of faith, that this is really what the purpose of my human life is about, to make the right choices, to switch on that light and come out of darkness. The Bhagavad Gita explains, then the Lord within the heart, recognizing that desire, shows us the way, guides us to people who give us the information, who give us the tools, who gives us the strength and the inspiration of darkness. Gita, Lord with heart, recognizing desire, shows us the guides us to people, us the information, us the tools, who gives us strength, inspiration of darkness. Gita, Lord with heart, recognizing desire, shows us the guides us to people, us the information, us the tools, who gives us strength, inspiration of darkness. Gita, Lord with heart, recognizing desire, us the strength and the information, guides us to people and the information, us the information, us the and the information that who gives us time, strength, important inspiration of darkness. Important. Gita, and think, Lord with even heart, recognizing desire, shows us the guides us to people, us the information, us the tools that who gives us company, strength, to that inspiration of darkness. That Gita, Lord with heart, adonizing desire, way, shows us the guides us to people, us the information, us the tools. It's deeper than just a superficial understanding, in the sense that in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, if your mind is pure and fixed on truth, even if you die in this battlefield, you will attain the supreme perfection. It's a matter of interpretation. From the superficial external perspective, it appears if you're shot down, then it's a violent death. But from a deeper perspective, if you're not in connection to your soul, internally death is always violent. A person laying in their bed at the time of death, when everything's stripped away, that's a very violent emotional situation. Yes? Emotionally, it's extremely violent. You're losing your identity, you're losing your family members, you're losing everything. So from a deeper perspective, a nonviolent death is when you are enlightened from within, you realize there is no death. Whatever way you die, it really doesn't matter because you're enlightened. Enlightenment is not a matter of the physical circumstances. Enlightenment is beyond physical circumstances. Otherwise, as we're enlightened, we're afraid of how we're going to die. Because if I die in this way, then I have to come back. And if I die in this way, then But it's, the Gita is explaining, Antakali chamameva. It's a question of what's within our heart. Yes? If you love God, whatever way you die, you're going to attain the ultimate supreme perfection. And if you're greedy, and you're exploitative, and you're hateful, even if you die just laying on your bed, surrounded by your relatives singing sweet songs, it's a violent death, because you're going to have to pay all your karma. Does that answer your question? It's not just a matter of the physical circumstance in which you die. It's a matter of the cultivation and state of consciousness that we have at that moment. And we find throughout history, many enlightened beings were murdered. Does that mean they were not enlightened? Not necessarily. It's because in the world of darkness, people in darkness, they consider light to be a threat. Just like a thief, if your house is pitch dark and he's in your house, with a little red, infrared type of flashlights robbing your things, and you open the light, you turn on the light, is he happy about that? Why? Because for a person in darkness, light exposes him or her. So such people, especially when they're in very, very powerful positions, they want to somehow or other do everything and anything to exterminate anybody who's trying to bring light, because they're exposed. They can't do their thing anymore. They can't exploit. So this duality between the dark and the light has always been in the world, and it's within the heart of every living being. There's that example of the good dog and the bad dog. The divine qualities within us and the dark qualities within us. We have a choice which one we're going to feed, which one we're going to nourish. And according to the choices we make, that's the one that's going to win. In one sense, of course, we wish these wonderful servants of society would have lived long. It's a tragedy that hurts the heart even generations later. Even if we weren't even born at the time when they were killed, it still hurts our heart that they were killed prematurely. But in another sense, in such situations, the way they died was like an exclamation point that really focused the society on what they represented. Yes? An example, Martin Luther King. The civil rights movement moved to a whole higher dimension after he was killed, because what he represented, what his desires were, became so much more focused and realized and important to people's hearts because of the sudden death. So in one sense, his mission was helped. On the top of every church is a crucifix. That was the most difficult thing for Jesus to undergo. But it's the symbol of his religion for two millenniums. So we should understand that in an enlightened state, everything is ultimately for the good of ourselves and for our mission. If we have that love, if we have that realization. The soul cannot be killed by weapons. The body can be. And ultimately the body is killed by time. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains 1 moment of enlightened consciousness is worth millions of times more than a long, long, long life lived in darkness. And we all have that choice. Would you like to ask something else on that subject? It's not an enlightened state necessarily to focus on celebrating suffering. It's celebrating life. Life which is indestructible. Have you ever met anyone who's not going to die on the physical platform? What's important is not whether we die this way or that way or this way or that way, because we're going to die. In one sense, from a physical perspective, the most violent thing in all of creation is time. Yes? It's going to kill everyone. It's going to dry the oceans. It's going to crush and powder the mountains. It's going to burn out the sun. It's going to extinguish the Earth planet. And in the very near future, it's going to kill everyone. And throughout, what is history? History is about dead people, yes? From a physical platform. But what was the message that they left behind them? Is it something for the enlightenment and good of others, or is it something that just is there? So this cultivation of consciousness and celebrating, rejoicing, enlightening within ourselves about our eternal existence, our ever-present relationship with God and each other, with neither time or death can in any way adulterate. No, the focus is not meditating on suffering and death. The focus is on celebrating life and feeling the ecstasy of the love of life beyond the physical platform. But the inevitable sufferings and death within this world are impetuses, as is the happiness and joy in this world. Everything should be seen when the light of proper purpose is turned on within us. We can see every situation as an impetus to strive to celebrate the inherent goodness, light, and joy within us. You see devotees, every morning they're up at some temples at 4:30. Here I think it's a little later because it's New York City and people stay out late. But people, they're dancing and singing at 4:30 in the morning. That means they're beginning their day in the most jubilant celebration of life and devotion to God. It's something very beautiful, something very positive. Negativity is darkness. You cannot eliminate negativity with negativity. You have to eliminate negativity with positivity. Does that make sense? cannot eliminate hatred with hatred, or greed with greed, or selfishness with selfishness. Suffering must be eliminated through awakening of inner joy. There's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita where it describes param drisva nivartate, that one can transcend all of the various dualities of pleasure, pain, honor, dishonor, success, failure, gain, loss, health, disease, birth, death, success, failure. These are all dualities. And each one is inseparable from the other side, like two sides of a coin. You can't take the heads and not take the tails. But the Gita explains in this particular verse that through these dualities, what was the verse I was saying? Yes, if we experience the higher taste within, spiritual love, spiritual peace, spiritual fulfillment, then it's beyond the dualities of both temporary joy and temporary suffering. Suffering is only temporary, no matter how extreme it may be. And physical mental joy is temporary, however extreme it may be. But when we connect ourselves to that joy within, it's beyond all this. Socrates was a happy man when he drank that hemlock. Yes? And everybody else who was killing him were just mediocre, miserable kind of people. Envious. So who's in history? Who's inspiring us? Does that mean he wanted to die that miserable death? No, it just didn't matter to him because he was experiencing an inner joy. There was a great saint named Haridas Thakur, and he was arrested because he was freely spreading love of God through chanting the names of God. And he was told, if you stop doing this, we'll let you go. If you continue, we're going to torture you by publicly beating you through 22 marketplaces till you're dead. Yes? He had that choice. And he just smiled at them. He knew they had no power to kill him because he was the eternal soul. He said, you could chop my body into 1,000 pieces. And each of those pieces, you could chop all those into another 1,000 pieces. But you could never stop me from being compassionate to others and taking shelter of the name of God. Do what you like with me. And they beat him in 22 marketplaces. And they threw him in the river. And a few minutes later, he came back to life and went right back to the same executioners and the same king that sentenced him, just to say, I'm back. So real spirituality is not about suffering and torture and misery and death. All that stuff's here anyway, yes? In some way or another. It's about the opposite. It's about focusing on life and light and love and seeing that potential in any situation. Whether we pass from this world with thousands of people loving us and praying for us and chanting God's names, and we just go, Hari, Hari. Or whether we some other way. What's important is what is within. And that is beyond the external circumstances. This is the teachings of Gita. Is there any other questions? Actually, in whatever impediments we have. The Gita says, Vyavashayatmaka buhir, ekeha kudunandana, bahushaka hyanantascha budhayo vyavashayanam. If we want something that's valuable in this world, many impediments will come before us. But those impediments are like tests that purify us if we just take them in the right spirit and never give up our determination. What is important is our determination. Many of the greatest people in history, they failed many, many times. Winston Churchill gave the definition of a successful person. Now, I'm not a follower of Winston Churchill, but his words are relevant. He said, the definition of a successful person is one who goes through failure after failure after failure after failure and never gives up the determination to succeed. On the spiritual path, if we have determination, we access a divine empowerment beyond our own to overcome obstacles. And sometimes those obstacles help us to really seriously cry out for that divine empowerment. Otherwise, we just kind of complacently, roll along the path of spirituality, thinking, yes, you're all right, I'm all right, Hari. And we remain superficial. But sometimes crises are important to get us to become very seriously and go very deep, because we need to at that time. Of course, if we do it anyway, without crisis, then we don't need those crises. Does that answer your question? So determination is very important. And if we want to do anything substantial within our life, especially in spiritual life, and even in our secular life, whatever, we have to have determination and not give up. That's the key to success, to never give up our aspirations and our ideals. Yes? Well, I'll answer the second part first. Then if he gives me permission to extend the course, then the class, then I'll answer the second one. First one. As far as accountant or Swami, to be honest with you, I'm 59 years old, and by memory, I do not know a single telephone number or address. I just have no capacity for numbers. It's my karma. I must have, misused numbers in my past life or something. I don't. But I have no capacity for numbers. I could remember verses from the Bhagavad Gita very easily. But when it comes to numbers, they just go in and out of my mind. So if I was an accountant, I'd put a lot of people in a lot of problems, probably. So better to be what we are than try to be something else. And Swami, to be honest with you, it's just what I love to do. It's wonderful. Just to meet people like you and try to serve you, and whether you accept or reject what I'm giving, I'm happy to try. That's what a Swami does. Try to bring people closer to truth and try to bring people closer to God and spread this beautiful message. So it gives joy, and it's something that, to whatever extent, it's something I love to do, and something that to some extent, I can do. Yes? So we shouldn't try to be something or someone we're not. If I was an enlightened accountant, That would be just as good. Might even be better. But I can't do it. But I can do this. Does that answer the second question? Now, the first question, there's different levels of realization of God. For some spiritual people, they're suffering in this world due to the dualities that we were speaking of pleasure and pain and so forth. And to the degree we take pleasure in something, we become attached to it. And to the degree we're attached, it hurts when it's taken away, and inevitably everything is taken away. So from that perspective, peace is to have no attachments, just to enter into a state of total neutrality, just to be, to exist with detachment. Yes? That's one form of enlightenment. The soul is Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means the eternal reality of the soul. For some spiritual paths, that Sat realization is the ultimate goal. Just to realize our eternal existence within, which is beyond this world. But according to the Vedas, it's full, but there's more full and most full. Chit and Ananda. Ananda means ecstasy. And the highest ecstasy is the ecstasy of love. Beyond just being in peace because everything is just existing beyond this world in a neutral state, is a dynamic, active relationship of love that's perfect and forever. And this is our relationship with God. So for the full development of love, that potential to be realized within our soul, yes, God is the necessity, because God is the source of everything, and everything is existing within God. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, when one thus learns the truth, one understands that everything is in me, everything is of me, and one sees me everywhere. For one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, for that person, I'm never lost, nor is he or she ever lost to me. So where there's love of God, we see every living being as a part of God, and there is love. That love is everlasting. So that's the full development of the potential of the soul to love. When we realize the all-attractive, all-beautiful aspect of the Supreme. Now, in every religion, there's different levels of realization of God. Sometimes God is portrayed as a very strict father who's throwing thunderbolts and punishing and casting people into hellish conditions or bringing them to heaven. But in the Vedas, it's explained that aspect of God is there, but there's a much higher aspect. Rasaraj, Rasavihari, Murlidhar, who's the ultimate reservoir of all beauty and of all pleasure. You don't see Krishna throwing thunderbolts on people. He's playing his flute, attracting people's hearts. Sometimes he plays like a little baby to steal our butter, to steal the love. These beautiful, sweet pastimes. This is the supreme absolute controller who's appearing in these wonderful ways just to attract our love by sweetness, by beauty, by wonderfulness. Yes? So there's different levels of love for God. So some spiritual paths, yes. Their goal of being free from suffering is to attain that neutral state of just realizing I am eternal, and ultimately I enter into a state of absolute impersonal void where there's no more suffering. That is called Brahman realization. Bhagavan realization is to unlock from our heart our eternal, unlimited capacity to love. Now, how to love every living being? When one loves the whole, one naturally, spontaneously loves every part of the whole. God is that whole. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam, the source of everything that exists. So there are different realizations that are taught by different schools of spiritual thought. Does that answer your question? So yes, for the full revelation and expression of love and compassion, the realization and experience of the all-beautiful, all-attractive God of our hearts and of everything that exists is necessary. Without that, the most realization we could have is just that everlasting peace. Now, for some people, everlasting peace is the ultimate goal. But for others, everlasting dynamic reciprocation of love is the highest goal. They're both true. We have our free will. Most people, both of those truths and realizations are in pure light. They're both different stages of enlightenment. But most people are still trying to turn off the darkness. Just trying to deal with the problems in this world. Puna punash charavata charavananam, again and again and again. Without looking within to realize our true potential. To be happy, to love, and to do wonderful things. To make real change within the world and society. Whether you're a Swami or an accountant. Does that answer your question? My dear friend Ari appears to be becoming somewhat impatient. And I know it's for the best possible reasons. So, from my heart of hearts, I thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.